When I was 6 years old, my grandmother Loretta showed me the corn crib my great-grandfather Ezra built in 1903, not because she wanted me to admire it, but because the backboard had warped and she needed help holding the replacement piece while she drove the nail. She hammered it in 4 strokes. She looked at it once. She said, "That will do another 40 years." Then she handed me the hammer and walked back to the kitchen. I held that hammer the rest of the afternoon, and I did not put it down until I had re-nailed every loose board on that structure by myself. That corn crib is still standing. I pass it every morning. Today I am going to show you how to build a weatherproof, insulated, legally exempt structure for under $200 using materials that most people load into a dumpster and pay to have hauled away. Not a tent, not a tarp, a structure with walls, a locking door, and a roof that sheds rain. The kind my great-grandfather built when this county had no roads, no stores, and no option but to figure it out from the hillside up. Let me tell you a number first. The average monthly rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in Louisville, Kentucky is $1,340. In Lexington, where I worked as a nurse for 5 years, it is pushing $1,500. The median hourly wage in Harlan County for a retail or service worker is right around $10.50. Do that math. I'll wait. It does not work. It has not worked for a long time. And the families who cannot make it work, the woman I heard about last spring, sleeping in a pickup truck with 2 kids in a Walmart parking lot off 119, the young man I know who has been on the Section 8 waiting list in this county for 3 years without a word, those families are not lazy. They are not failures. They are caught between 2 numbers that were never designed to meet. I spent 5 years working as a nurse in Lexington. I know what the intake paperwork looks like when a child comes in with respiratory problems that started because she spent a winter in a vehicle that fogged every night from 2 bodies warming a sealed space. That moisture becomes mold. That mold becomes an infection. That infection becomes a bill, and the bill makes the math worse. Now, I am not going to tell you this is a solution to the housing crisis in America. I am not going to tell you it is simple or that it works in every situation. What I'm going to tell you is this: a weatherproof, lockable, insulated structure that you own outright and that cannot be taken from you for a missed rent payment can be built by a person with $200, a borrowed truck, and the willingness to learn a few things. The industry has never had any financial interest in teaching you. My great-grandfather Ezra Combs would not have called that exceptional. He would have called it Tuesday. Now here is the part I need to be plain about before we go further, because I have learned from experience that when I say something like, build a house for $200, half the audience stops listening, and the other half starts sending me messages at 2 in the morning wanting measurements. So let me give you the legal foundation first. In the overwhelming majority of rural counties in Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and across the rural South, structures under 120 square feet that are not connected to municipal water or sewer do not require a building permit. Not around 120, not approximately. The threshold is 120 square feet. Below it, in most unincorporated rural areas, the county inspector has no jurisdiction. This is not a loophole someone dug up on a legal forum. It is standard zoning language written into county code books across the rural South, unchanged for decades, because nobody with money ever had reason to ask about it. An 8-foot by 12-foot structure has a footprint of 96 square feet. That is 24 square feet under the threshold. That calculation is not an accident. It is your starting point. Now, 96 square feet is not a palace. I want to be honest about that. It is approximately the size of a large walk-in closet in a suburban house, but I want you to understand what fits inside it: a sleeping area, a cooking station, a storage wall, and a door that locks behind you. That is what shelter means. That is what shelter has always meant in every holler in every county on this mountain before the term housing market ever existed. Let me talk about materials because this is where people get stuck. At retail prices, an 8 by 12 shed kit from a home improvement store runs between $1,200 and $1,800. I want you to forget that number entirely. The retail price of lumber is not the only price of lumber. It is the price they charge people who do not know there is another way. Here is what the other way looks like. Residential construction sites across the rural South run on a predictable waste cycle. When a framing crew finishes rough framing on a new house, the cutoffs, warped boards, and end pieces go into a dumpster that sits on site for 48 to 72 hours before the waste hauler comes. A single dumpster on a subdivision build will contain 20 to 30 usable 2x4s, plywood sheets with cosmetic surface damage but structurally sound cores, and bundles of shortcuts too small for the original job, but perfectly sized for an 8 by 12 frame. They are going to the landfill. The hauler comes Tuesday. You can fill your truck Monday evening. Drive slowly through any active subdivision after 5 o'clock when the crew has left for the day. Note the dumpsters. Come back. If you can reach the foreman beforehand, ask. Most will say yes, because it saves them tipping fees. Bring your truck and your patience. Do this for 3 weeks and you will have more framing lumber than you need. That is Source 1. Source 2 is your regional habitat for Humanity Restore. Most mid-sized cities and county seats across the South have one. Interior doors run $10 to $20. Bags of miscellaneous screws and nails sell for $3. Reclaimed metal roofing panels, the kind pulled from barn demolitions, come in at $30 to $50 for enough square footage to cover an 8 by 12 roof with proper overlap. These are not seconds. They are donated materials from contractors who cannot use what is left over. The material is the same. The price is a fraction. I am fixing to tell you about Source 3, and this is the one most people have never thought about: wooden shipping pallets. Feed stores, agricultural suppliers, small manufacturers, hardware distributors, all of them stack used pallets behind their buildings, and all of them will give those pallets away to anyone willing to haul them. A standard 48-inch by 40-inch pallet, broken down properly, yields 6 to 8 usable boards plus cross-bracing pieces that work as sheathing and blocking. Those boards are thinner than dimensional lumber, but they are surprisingly strong when fastened at proper intervals. Now, getting those boards off the pallet without splitting them is a skill. Your first dozen pallets, if you go at them with a claw hammer, you will ruin more than you save. Here is what actually works. Score along the nail line with a utility knife, then work a flat pry bar in at a shallow angle, not straight down, low and steady, and lever slowly. The board comes off clean. Once your hands learn the motion, you can strip a full pallet to usable lumber in 15 minutes. 40 pallets, 15 minutes apiece, 10 hours of work over 2 weekends. That is your exterior sheathing, your blocking, your interior shelving, and part of your floor framing, all for free. Your total cash outlay, buying only what you cannot source free, roofing sealant, fasteners, expanding foam, and your metal roofing panels, should land between $150 and $200, including the fuel for your collection runs. Now I want to walk you through the build itself, from the ground up, in the order it has to happen. Foundation first. 12 cinder blocks, 3 rows of 4 in a pier formation. Level each one with a 4-foot level and pack sand beneath any that need height adjustment. This lifts your floor frame 8 inches off the ground. Those 8 inches do 2 things. First, they prevent moisture from wicking up through the subfloor, the same moisture that has been rotting crawl spaces in old Appalachian farmhouses since the first settlers put up a log cabin without a proper vapor break. Second, they allow airflow beneath the structure, which is your first and cheapest line of defense against mold in a humid climate. No poured slab, no footers. Cinder blocks, sand, and a level. That is your foundation, and it is also what keeps you under the permit threshold, because a poured concrete foundation triggers inspection in counties where a block pier does not. Frame the floor next. Take your strongest salvaged 2x4s, double them up around the perimeter for rigidity, and cross brace at 16-inch intervals. Plywood sheets, even the ones with surface water staining, if the core is solid, go down as your subfloor. Tap each sheet, listen for the hollow sound. Use only what is sound underneath the surface. Walls, vertical studs at 24-inch spacing instead of the standard 16-inch. In a single-story structure under 100 square feet, 24-inch spacing is structurally adequate. This is not improvising. It is the engineering standard for outbuildings in every farm construction guide published since the 1940s. It also uses 1/3 less material than 16-inch spacing. Every stud you save is one less stud to source. Before the exterior sheathing goes on, wrap the entire frame in Tyvek house wrap. You will find this material in construction dumpsters in large reusable sections. Builders cut it generously, and the offcuts go in the bin. Overlap each sheet by at least 6 inches. Run duct tape along every seam. What you are building is a sealed moisture and wind barrier that surrounds the frame before anything goes on the outside. Your pallet boards go on top of that, horizontal, overlapping each course by an inch, fastened with 2 screws per stud. They protect the Tyvek from UV and physical damage. When the first heavy rain comes, water will hit those boards, run down to the Tyvek underneath, and shed to the ground. It will not come through. That is what the overlap is for. Roof. A shed-style roof, single slope, higher at the front, lower at the rear, is the simplest weatherproof roof you can build. Salvage 2x4 rafters, spaced 24 inches apart, carry your reclaimed metal roofing panels. 2-inch overhang on all 4 sides. Silicone caulk, not latex, seals every nail hole and every seam. Metal roofing expands and contracts with temperature change. Only silicone stays flexible through that movement. Do not substitute this. Angle the rear of the roof to direct water away from your door and toward the back wall, where you hang your collection gutter. A salvaged aluminum gutter section directs runoff into a 55-gallon food-grade drum, the kind restaurants discard after cooking oil, available free if you ask at the back door. Mesh screen across the top filters debris. At 40 or more inches of annual rainfall, average for most of the rural South, that drum fills reliably through the wet months and supplements water you bring from public sources on dry weeks. Purify it. A few drops of unscented household bleach per gallon of collected rainwater, let it sit 30 minutes, and you have potable water by standards the EPA has documented since 1968. Your annual purification cost is approximately $4 in bleach. Interior, 2-burner propane camp stove, available on clearance for around $25. 1 16-ounce propane canister per week at roughly $3 runs you $150 annually for cooking fuel. When weather allows, cook outside. When it does not, crack the door. Ventilation for a small propane output in a small space is not optional, it is the rule. Same logic my grandmother's kitchen ran on, and she cooked on a wood stove in a room smaller than this one for 50 years. Insulation, cardboard, and salvaged blankets layered between wall studs and pinned in place. Dead air trapped in those pockets holds heat the same way double pane glass does. Same physics, no purchase required. On the floor, salvaged carpet squares over the plywood subfloor stop the cold transfer that makes bare wood feel like stepping on frozen ground in January. Grandmother Loretta never bought insulation in her life. She used what the holler had. The principle is unchanged. Now let me be honest about what this will not do, because I will not let you build this and then be disappointed. This is not a permanent home in the conventional meaning of that word. It is a 96 square foot structure with a rainwater system and a propane stove. For a family with young children, it is a crisis bridge, not a long-term destination. I will not tell you otherwise. If you are in an acute situation, nowhere to go in the next 30 days, this build takes 8 to 11 weeks of consistent part-time work. That is an honest number, not an optimistic one. It is not a weekend project. It is a sustained effort with a real result at the end. This build also requires land. It requires a property owner willing to give verbal permission for you to place a structure on their land in exchange for something, lot maintenance, neighborly presence, checking on the place when they travel. That conversation happens more often than people expect in rural communities, but it requires asking. And asking requires finding the right person to approach. I am not pretending those obstacles away. This is a real tool with real constraints. Know what it is for, and it will serve you. Ask it to do something it cannot, and it will disappoint you. That is not the tool's fault. Now here is the part I want you to sit with. Everything I just described, the dumpster sourcing, the pallet breakdown, the permit threshold, the pier foundation, the Tyvek wrap, the rainwater barrel, none of it is hidden information. The permit threshold is in the county code book. The pallet breakdown technique has been passed between workers and homesteaders for generations. The Tyvek is in the dumpster because the crew threw it there, not because anyone locked it up. This knowledge is not secret. It is just not taught. There is no money in teaching a family to build shelter from materials other people pay to dispose of. The lumber industry sells tens of billions of dollars of dimensional lumber annually in this country. The rental market runs on the assumption that the alternative to renting is buying. And buying requires a mortgage, which requires a bank, which requires credit, which requires employment, which requires a stable address, which requires rent. You see how that closes. They did not hide it. They just stayed quiet. And quiet does not run a commercial. Quiet does not fund a curriculum. So a whole generation grew up believing that shelter requires a lease or a loan, because that was the only story that ever paid for airtime. That is not a conspiracy. It is just how the money flows. My great-grandfather Ezra Combs came to Harlan County with nothing but a broadaxe and the understanding that a man who could not build it owned nothing. He built a farmhouse that 4 generations of my family have lived in. He built a corn crib that my grandmother repaired with a hammer and 4 strokes and said would last another 40 years. And it did. I am not asking you to live the way Ezra lived. I am asking you to know what he knew, that between you and shelter stands a set of skills the system forgot to charge you for because it forgot you might need them. The material is in the dumpster. The land is behind the retired woman's house down the county road. The knowledge is right here. A person who can build a wall from what other people throw away does not need permission from anyone to have a place to stand. So here's what I want you to do. 1. Look up your county code. Call your county planning office or find the zoning ordinance on your county government's website. Ask specifically, what is the maximum square footage for an unpermitted structure on privately owned rural land? And does utility connection trigger a permit? Write the number down. Know your threshold before you build. 2. Find your construction sites this week. Drive through any active subdivision after 5 o'clock. Look for the dumpsters. Come back before Tuesday. Talk to the foreman if you can. Start collecting lumber even if you do not have your land or your plans yet. A dry pile of salvaged 2x4s costs you nothing and is ready when you are. 3. Visit your local Habitat for Humanity Restore. Walk through the entire store. Look at the roofing materials, the doors, the hardware bins. Learn what is usually on the shelves and at what price. That store is your materials budget's best ally. 4. Identify your pallet sources, feed stores, farm supply stores, small warehouses near county roads. Ask at the back door. Take 20 pallets to start. Practice the pry bar technique until you can strip one cleanly in 15 minutes. 5. Have the land conversation. Think of one person you know, or one door you could knock on, who owns rural land sitting unused. Approach them plainly. Explain your situation and what you are offering in return. You may be surprised how that conversation goes. Until then, find one construction site dumpster this week, fill your truck before Tuesday's haul, and start the pile. Tell me in the comments, have you ever built something yourself that everyone around you said you had to hire out? I want to know what you made and how it turned out. Because the women who kept this country alive through hard winters and harder years knew things we are only just beginning to remember. Don't let it die with a generation.